They said she was worthless, a failed wolf, a servant born to scrub floors and keep silent. But when Alpha King Rowan Blackthorn found Leora Vale bleeding in the kitchen at midnight, everything he thought he knew about his pack shattered in an instant. What he discovered that night would divide his kingdom, ignite a war, and force him to choose between loyalty to tradition and the broken girl who should never have survived. This is the story of how the most despised member of the Blackthorn pack became its fiercest protector, and how one alpha's decision to defy his counsel changed everything. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments right now. Hit that like button and stay until the end, because this story will leave you breathless. The winter wind howled through the stone corridors of Blackthorn Castle like a living thing. It rattled the iron-barred windows and sent icy drafts curling beneath doorways, seeking warmth wherever warmth could be stolen. Rowan Blackthorn stood on the battlements overlooking the northern forest, his broad shoulders squared against the cold. His wolf stirred restlessly beneath his skin, eager to run, to hunt, to escape the suffocating weight of leadership that pressed down on him every waking hour. He was 28 years old, Alpha King of the most powerful pack in the Northern Territories, undefeated in combat, feared by rivals, respected by allies, and utterly exhausted. "Your Majesty," came a low voice behind him. Rowan turned. His second, Marcus Graythorn, approached with quiet footsteps. The older wolf's scarred face was impassive, but his dark eyes glinted with concern. "The Border Patrol found nothing," Marcus reported. "No rogue scent. No territorial violations. Whatever you heard earlier was likely an animal." Rowan nodded slowly. He had cut short a council meeting 2 hours earlier, driven by an inexplicable sense of unease. His instincts rarely failed him, but perhaps tonight they had. "Good," Rowan said quietly. "Tell the guards to stand down. I'll inspect the eastern perimeter at dawn." Marcus hesitated. "You should rest, Rowan. You've been running patrols every night this week." "I'm fine." "You're burning yourself out." Rowan's jaw tightened. "I said I'm fine, Marcus." The second held his gaze for a long moment, then bowed his head. "As you command, Your Majesty." Marcus disappeared into the shadows, leaving Rowan alone once more. The Alpha King exhaled slowly, his breath misting in the frigid air. He knew Marcus was right. He had been pushing himself too hard. But the unrest in the Northern Territories demanded vigilance. Rival packs were testing his borders. Whispers of rebellion stirred in the outlying villages. And within his own council, old grievances festered like infected wounds. He could not afford to show weakness. Rowan descended the winding stone staircase that led from the battlements into the main keep. The castle was silent at this hour. Most of the pack had retired to their chambers. Only the night guards remained on duty, their footsteps echoing faintly through the halls. He moved through the corridors with the easy grace of a predator, his senses attuned to every sound, every scent. The castle smelled of wood smoke and old stone and the faint metallic tang of silver reinforcements embedded in the walls, protections against enemy wolves who might attempt an invasion. Rowan's chambers were on the 3rd floor, but as he passed the grand staircase, he paused. A sound, faint, almost inaudible beneath the wind, a soft, choked sob. His wolf surged forward instantly, every nerve suddenly alert. The sound came from below, from the lower levels where the kitchens and storage rooms lay. Rowan changed direction without hesitation. He descended the main staircase, then took a narrower servants' passage that spiraled downward into the belly of the castle. The air grew warmer as he descended, heated by the massive ovens that baked bread through the night. The sobbing grew louder. Rowan's chest tightened. Someone was in pain. He reached the kitchen entrance and pushed open the heavy wooden door. The kitchens were cavernous, lined with blackened hearths and long oak tables stained by decades of use. Copper pots hung from iron hooks. Barrels of flour and salted meat stood in neat rows along the far wall. And huddled on the stone floor beside the largest hearth, trembling violently, was a girl. Rowan froze. She was small, painfully thin, her body curled into a tight ball as if trying to make herself disappear. Her hair was dark and tangled, falling in matted waves over her face. She wore a simple servant's dress, torn at the shoulder. Her bare feet were filthy, and her hands, small, delicate hands, were wrapped around her knees as she rocked slowly back and forth. She was crying, quietly, desperately. The kind of crying that came from someone who had learned long ago that screaming brought only worse punishment. Rowan's wolf snarled in fury. He stepped forward carefully, his boots making no sound on the stone floor. "Hey," he said softly. The girl gasped and jerked upright, her tear-streaked face snapping toward him. Her eyes, wide and green and filled with absolute terror, locked onto his. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then she scrambled backward, her hands scrabbling against the stone as she tried to put distance between them. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice hoarse and broken. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Please don't. I'll leave. I'm sorry." "Stop." Rowan held up both hands, palms out. "I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't believe him. He could see it in her eyes. She pressed herself against the hearth wall, her entire body shaking so violently that her teeth chattered. Rowan crouched down slowly, lowering himself to her level. "I'm not angry," he said quietly. "I just want to help." The girl stared at him, her breathing rapid and shallow. She looked like a cornered animal, ready to bolt at the slightest provocation. Rowan studied her face. There was something vaguely familiar about her, though he could not place it. She was young, perhaps 19 or 20. Her features were delicate, her skin pale beneath the bruises. Bruises. Rowan's eyes narrowed. There were dark purple marks along her jaw, faint yellowing bruises on her arms. And when she shifted slightly, he saw it. The torn sleeve of her dress had slipped further down her shoulder, revealing her upper back. Scars. Deep, ragged scars crisscrossed her pale skin like a map of suffering. Some were old and faded. Others were fresh, still pink and raised. Rowan's vision went red. "Who did this to you?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. The girl flinched violently, her eyes widening in fresh panic. Please don't. I didn't mean to be here. I was just..." "Who hurt you?" Rowan repeated, forcing himself to soften his tone. "Tell me." She shook her head frantically, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No one. It's nothing. I'm fine. I'm sorry for disturbing you, Your Majesty. You know who I am." She nodded quickly, her gaze dropping to the floor. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Then you know I don't tolerate abuse within my pack." Rowan kept his voice steady, though his wolf was howling for blood. "Tell me who hurt you, and I swear to you, they will answer for it." The girl's lips trembled. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. Fear radiated from her in waves. "I can't," she whispered finally. "Why not?" "Because he'll kill me." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Rowan's jaw clenched. "Who is he?" She didn't answer. Rowan studied her carefully. The bruises, the scars, the way she flinched at sudden movements. This was not the result of a single beating. This was systematic, prolonged, deliberate, and someone in his pack had been doing this under his nose for years. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Leora. Lyora Vale." Vale. Recognition slammed into Rowan like a physical blow. Garrick Vale, his beta, one of his most trusted advisors. Garrick had a daughter. Rowan had seen her once or twice over the years, always in the background, always silent, always invisible. She worked in the kitchens, he'd been told. A failed wolf, weak, useless. That was what Garrick had said. Rowan's blood turned to ice. "Garrick is your father," he said slowly. Leora's entire body went rigid. She stared at him with wide, terrified eyes, and in that moment, Rowan saw the truth written across her face as clearly as the scars on her back. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't tell him I was here. Please, I'll do anything. I'll work harder. I'll stay out of sight, I promise. Just don't. Stop." Rowan's voice was sharp enough to cut through her panic. "You're not going back to him." Leora blinked, confusion flickering across her tear-streaked face. "What?" "You're not going back." Rowan rose to his full height, his decision made. "Not tonight. Not ever." "But he's the beta. You can't." "I can do whatever I want. I'm the Alpha King." Rowan's voice was cold steel. "And I will not allow anyone in my pack to suffer like this. Not while I draw breath." Leora stared up at him. Her expression caught somewhere between disbelief and hope. Rowan extended his hand toward her. "Come with me." She didn't move. "Leora," he said gently. You're safe now. I promise. Slowly, so slowly, she reached out and placed her trembling hand in his. Her skin was ice cold. Rowan pulled her carefully to her feet. She swayed slightly, and he realized with a jolt of anger that she was malnourished. When was the last time she'd eaten a full meal? Can you walk? He asked. She nodded quickly. Yes, Your Majesty. Good. Follow me. Rowan led her out of the kitchens and up through the servants' passages. He did not take her to the main halls where others might see. Instead, he guided her through the narrow corridors reserved for staff, moving quickly and silently. They climbed 3 flights of stairs before reaching the upper levels of the keep. Here, the stone walls were draped with tapestries and thick rugs muffled their footsteps. Rowan stopped before a heavy oak door and pushed it open. The room beyond was modest but comfortable, a guest chamber with a 4-poster bed, a writing desk, and a small fireplace. Clean linens, warm furs, a window overlooking the eastern forest. Leora stared at the room as if she had stepped into a dream. This is yours, Rowan said quietly. For now. She turned to him, her eyes wide. I can't. This is too much. I don't deserve. You deserve safety, Rowan interrupted firmly. You deserve rest. You deserve to be treated like a person, not a punching bag. Leora's breath hitched. She looked like she wanted to argue, but no words came. Rowan stepped back toward the door. I'll have food brought up, and clean clothes. Lock the door after I leave. Don't open it for anyone except me or the healer. The healer? Leora's voice was barely audible. Yes, someone needs to tend to those wounds. Rowan's eyes darkened. And I need to know the full extent of what was done to you. Leora's face crumpled. She looked down at her hands, her shoulders shaking. Thank you, she whispered. Rowan inclined his head. Rest. We'll talk more in the morning. He stepped out into the corridor and closed the door behind him. For a long moment, he simply stood there, his hands clenched into fists. Garrick Vale, his beta, his trusted advisor. A man who had fought beside him in countless battles. A man who had brutalized his own daughter for years. Rowan's wolf surged forward, demanding action, demanding blood. But Rowan forced himself to breathe slowly, carefully. He needed to think, to plan, to gather evidence. Because when he moved against Garrick, he could not afford to fail. The next morning, Rowan summoned Alara Windheart, the pack's chief healer. Alara was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. She had tended to Rowan's wounds more times than he could count, and he trusted her completely. There's a girl in the East Guest Chamber, Rowan said quietly. She's been severely abused. I need you to examine her injuries and document everything. Alara's expression darkened. Abused by whom? I'll tell you after you've seen her. Alara studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I'll go now. One more thing, Rowan added. She's terrified. Don't push her. If she refuses to let you examine her, don't force it. Alara's gaze softened. Understood. Rowan waited in his study while Alara went to see Leora. He tried to focus on council reports, but his mind kept circling back to the broken girl he'd found in the kitchen. How long had she been suffering? How had he not noticed? An hour later, Alara returned. Her face was pale, and her hands trembled slightly as she set down a leather-bound notebook on Rowan's desk. Well? Rowan demanded. Alara's voice was tight with suppressed rage. She has 17 distinct scars on her back, most of them from a whip or a cane. 3 cracked ribs that healed poorly. Bruises in various stages of healing all over her body. Signs of chronic malnutrition. And... She paused, her jaw clenching. And what? Rowan's voice was dangerously quiet. She's been poisoned, Alara said flatly. Years ago. Something that damaged her wolf permanently. Rowan went very still. Explain. During her first transformation, someone gave her a substance that interrupted the process. It's why she never fully shifted. It's why she's been labeled a failure. Alara's eyes blazed with fury. It wasn't natural, Rowan. Someone did this to her deliberately. Rowan's vision blurred red. Who? He demanded, though he already knew the answer. She wouldn't say, Alara said quietly, but I'd wager everything I own that it was her father. Rowan stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the stone floor. "Rowan," Alara began. "Thank you, Alara," Rowan said, his voice cold and distant. "That will be all." Alara hesitated, then bowed her head and left. Rowan stood alone in his study, his hands braced against the desk. Garrick Vale had poisoned his own daughter, had ensured she would fail, had used that failure as justification to torment her for years, and Rowan had been blind to it. No more. Rowan straightened, his decision crystallizing into unshakable resolve. He would bring Garrick before the council. He would strip him of his rank. He would exile him from the pack. And if anyone tried to stop him, they would face the full wrath of the Alpha King. That evening, Rowan returned to Leora's room. She answered his knock hesitantly, opening the door just a crack. When she saw it was him, she stepped back and allowed him to enter. She looked slightly better. Her hair had been washed and braided. She wore clean clothes, a simple tunic and trousers that were still too large for her thin frame, but her eyes were still haunted. "How are you feeling?" Rowan asked gently. "Better," Leora said quietly. "Thank you for everything." Rowan nodded. Alara told me what she found. Leora's face went pale. She looked away, wrapping her arms around herself. "I need you to tell me the truth," Rowan said carefully. "Did your father poison you during your first transformation?" Leora's breath hitched. For a long moment she said nothing, then slowly she nodded. "He said I was weak," she whispered. "He said I didn't deserve to be a wolf, so he made sure I would fail." Rowan's hands clenched into fists. "How long has he been hurting you?" "Since I was 12. 12. Rowan closed his eyes, struggling to contain the rage that threatened to consume him. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" he asked quietly. Leora's laugh was bitter and broken. "Who would have believed me? He's the beta. I'm nothing. Just a failed wolf who can't even shift." "You are not nothing," Rowan said fiercely. "Do you hear me? You are a member of this pack, and you deserved protection. You deserved safety, and I failed you." Leora's eyes widened. "You didn't." "I did." Rowan's voice was raw. "I should have seen. I should have known. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure it never happens again." Tears spilled down Leora's cheeks. Rowan stepped closer, his voice gentle. "I'm going to bring charges against your father before the council. I'm going to strip him of his rank and exile him from the pack. But I need your testimony. I need you to tell them what he did." Leora's face went sheet white. "I can't." "You can." "He'll kill me." "He won't." Rowan's voice was iron. "Because I will be standing between you and him. And I swear on my life, Leora, no one will hurt you again." Leora stared at him, her entire body trembling. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it." Rowan exhaled slowly. "Good. The council meets tomorrow night. Can you be ready?" Leora nodded again, though fear still shadowed her eyes. Rowan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're braver than you know, Leora Vale. And when this is over, you're going to be free." For the first time since he'd met her, Leora smiled. It was a small, fragile thing, but it was hope. The council chamber was built from black stone quarried from the heart of the northern mountains. Torches flickered along the walls, casting dancing shadows across the faces of the 12 elders who sat in a semicircle around the Alpha King's throne. Rowan stood at the center of the chamber, his shoulders squared, his expression carved from ice. Behind him, barely visible in the shadows near the entrance, Leora waited with Alara at her side. The girl was trembling. Rowan could hear her rapid heartbeat even from across the room. Garrick Vale sat in his customary position at Rowan's right hand. The beta was a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s with iron-gray hair and a face weathered by decades of combat. He looked calm, confident, utterly unaware of the storm about to break over his head. Marcus Graythorn stood near the wall, his scarred face impassive, but Rowan caught the slight tension in his second's posture. Marcus knew something was coming. "This emergency session is highly irregular, Your Majesty," said Elder Thaddeus, a gaunt wolf with piercing blue eyes. "What matter requires such urgency?" Rowan's voice was cold and clear. "I have discovered evidence of a crime committed within our pack, a crime so heinous that it strikes at the very foundation of what we claim to be." Silence fell across the chamber. Every elder leaned forward. "What crime?" demanded Elder Corinne, a sharp-faced woman with silver hair bound in a severe knot. "Child abuse," Rowan said flatly. "Torture, poisoning, crimes committed over the course of 7 years against a member of this pack who had no power to defend herself." Murmurs rippled through the council. Garrick's expression remained neutral, but Rowan saw the faint tightening around his eyes. "That is a serious accusation," Thaddeus said slowly. "Who is the accused?" Rowan turned and looked directly at Garrick. "Beta Garrick Vale." The chamber exploded. Garrick shot to his feet, his face flushing with fury. "This is outrageous. I demand to know—" "Sit down," Rowan commanded, his voice cracking like a whip. Garrick froze. For a moment, their eyes locked in a silent battle of wills. Then slowly, Garrick lowered himself back into his chair. But his hands gripped the armrest so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "You will have your chance to speak," Rowan said coldly. "But first, the council will hear the evidence." He gestured toward the shadows. "Elara, bring her forward." The healer emerged from the darkness, one hand gently guiding Leora into the torchlight. The girl looked like she might faint. Her face was pale as snow, and she kept her eyes fixed on the floor. She wore a simple gray dress that covered her arms and back, but Rowan knew what lay beneath. Garrick's expression flickered, just for an instant, with something that might have been panic. "This is Leora Vale," Rowan announced, "daughter of Beta Garrick. For the past 7 years, she has been systematically brutalized by her father, beaten, starved, poisoned during her first transformation to ensure she would fail." Gasps echoed through the chamber. "Lies!" Garrick roared, surging to his feet again. "She's a failed wolf, weak. She's always been weak. This is slander." "Show them," Rowan said quietly, looking at Leora. Leora's breath came in short, panicked gasps. Her hands shook violently. "You don't have to do this," Elara murmured beside her. "Yes, I do," Leora whispered. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she reached up and unfastened the ties at the back of her dress. The fabric slipped down her shoulders, exposing her back to the council. The reaction was immediate. Elder Corinne's hand flew to her mouth. Thaddeus went rigid in his seat. Even Marcus, who had seen countless battlefields, looked away with disgust. The scars were worse in the torchlight. Deep, ragged lines crisscrossed Leora's pale skin like a grotesque tapestry of suffering. Some were old and faded. Others were still pink and raised. "These wounds were inflicted with precision," Elara said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Whoever did this knew exactly how much pain to cause without killing her. And this—" She pointed to a cluster of scars near Leora's spine. "This pattern is consistent with a silver-tipped whip." Silver. The metal burned werewolves on contact. It was never used in training, never used in punishment. It was used only to torture. Garrick's face had gone ashen. She must have gotten those somewhere else. I never—" "Liar," Rowan said softly. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. "Leora," Rowan continued, his voice gentle now. "Tell the council what your father did to you." Leora pulled her dress back up with shaking hands. She still couldn't look at anyone. "He started when I was 12, she whispered, "after my mother died. He said I was worthless, that I didn't deserve to carry the Vale name." Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to continue. "When I was 15, it was time for my first transformation. All the other wolves my age were excited, but I was terrified, because the night before, my father gave me something to drink. He said it was a tonic to help me shift, but it wasn't." Tears streamed down her face. "The next day when the moon rose, I tried to transform, but I couldn't. My wolf was there. I could feel her, but she couldn't break through. It felt like I was being ripped apart from the inside. I screamed and screamed, but nothing happened." Leora's hands clenched into fists. "Everyone saw. Everyone watched me fail. And my father, he told them I was defective, that I didn't have a wolf, that I was an embarrassment to the pack." Elder Thaddeus's face had gone very still. "He poisoned you deliberately." Leora nodded. "He wanted me to fail. And after I did, he used it as an excuse to hurt me. He said I deserved it, that I needed to be punished for shaming the family." "This is insane," Garrick shouted. She's lying. She's making this up because she's bitter. I have the medical evidence, Alara interrupted coldly. The poison she describes, wolfsbane extract mixed with silver nitrate, leaves a specific signature in the body. I found traces of it in her blood even now, 7 years later. The council erupted into chaos. Elders shouted at each other. Some demanded Garrick's immediate arrest. Others called for more evidence. A few looked genuinely horrified. Rowan let them argue for exactly 30 seconds. Then he raised one hand and silence fell instantly. The evidence is clear, Rowan said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Garrick Vale poisoned his daughter to sabotage her transformation. He then used her failure as justification to torture her for years. These are not the actions of a beta. These are not the actions of a pack member. These are the actions of a monster. Garrick's face twisted with rage. You have no right. I have every right. Rowan's voice thundered through the chamber. I am the Alpha King, and I will not allow this pack to harbor abusers. He turned to the council. I am stripping Garrick Vale of his rank as Beta, effective immediately. He is hereby exiled from Blackthorn territory. If he sets foot on our lands again, he will be executed. The chamber went deathly silent. Garrick stared at Rowan, his expression caught between disbelief and fury. You can't do this. I've served this pack for 30 years. And you've spent 7 of them torturing a child, Rowan said coldly. You're lucky I don't kill you where you stand. Garrick's hands trembled. For a moment, Rowan thought the man might actually attack him. Then Elder Thaddeus spoke. This decision is too hasty, Your Majesty. Rowan's eyes snapped to the old wolf. Excuse me? Thaddeus rose slowly to his feet. I do not doubt the evidence. The girl's injuries are real. But to exile a beta without a formal trial, to strip him of rank based on testimony alone, sets a dangerous precedent. Murmurs of agreement rippled through several of the other elders. Rowan's jaw clenched. The evidence is overwhelming. Perhaps, Thaddeus said carefully. But many in this pack have known Garrick for decades. They respect him, trust him. If we move against him without following proper protocol, it will create division. Then let them be divided, Rowan snapped. I will not compromise on this. Your Majesty, enough. Rowan's voice was final. I have made my decision. Garrick Vale is exiled. Marcus, escort him to the border. Marcus stepped forward without hesitation. Yes, Your Majesty. But Garrick didn't move. He stood frozen in place, his eyes locked on Rowan with an expression of pure hatred. You'll regret this, Garrick said quietly. This pack needs strong leadership, not a king who coddles the weak. Get out, Rowan said softly, before I change my mind about letting you live. For a long, tense moment, nobody moved. Then Garrick turned and strode toward the exit. Marcus followed close behind, one hand resting on the hilt of his blade. As Garrick passed Leora, he stopped. You always were a disappointment, he said, his voice dripping with venom. Leora flinched as if struck. Rowan moved faster than thought. He crossed the chamber in 3 strides and slammed Garrick against the stone wall, one hand wrapped around the man's throat. Say one more word to her, Rowan growled, his eyes flashing gold. Just one, and I will rip your throat out with my bare hands. Garrick gasped for air, his face turning red. Rowan held him there for 3 more seconds, then released him with a shove. Garrick stumbled, coughing. Marcus grabbed his arm and hauled him toward the door. Move, Marcus said coldly. They disappeared into the corridor. Rowan stood in the center of the chamber, his chest heaving. Every nerve in his body screamed for him to chase Garrick down and finish this properly. But he forced himself to breathe, to think. He turned to the council. If anyone else has objections, voice them now. Silence. Good. Rowan's voice was ice. This session is adjourned. The elders filed out slowly, casting uneasy glances at Leora as they passed. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked skeptical. Elder Corinne paused beside Rowan. You've made an enemy tonight, Your Majesty. I've made many enemies, Rowan said quietly. One more won't kill me. Corinne's expression was grim. Let's hope you're right. She left. Soon, only Rowan, Leora, and Alara remained in the chamber. Leora was crying silently, her shoulders shaking. Rowan approached her carefully. You did well. I ruined everything, Leora whispered. The council hates you now because of me. The council will adapt, Rowan said firmly. And even if they don't, I don't care. You deserve justice, and you got it. Leora looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen. What happens now? Now you heal, Rowan said gently, and you learn to live without fear. Leora's breath hitched. I don't know how. You'll learn, Rowan promised. I'll help you. The next 3 weeks passed in uneasy tension. News of Garrick's exile spread through the pack like wildfire. Reactions were mixed. Some, mostly younger wolves and those who had never trusted Garrick, supported Rowan's decision, but others, particularly the older generation, viewed it as reckless. The Alpha King has gone soft, Rowan overheard one elder muttering in the great hall, exiling a beta over some girl's sob story. Rowan said nothing, but his wolf snarled in fury. Leora remained in the guest chamber, rarely venturing out. Alara visited daily to tend to her wounds and ensure she ate properly. Slowly, painfully, the girl began to put on weight. The bruises faded. The scars would never fully disappear, but they stopped being the first thing people noticed about her. Rowan visited her every evening. At first, their conversations were stilted and awkward. Leora couldn't seem to believe that the Alpha King actually wanted to spend time with her. She answered his questions in monosyllables and avoided eye contact, but gradually she began to relax. One night, Rowan brought a chessboard. Do you know how to play? He asked. Leora shook her head. My father said games were a waste of time. Your father was wrong about a lot of things, Rowan said dryly. Come on, I'll teach you. They spent the next hour hunched over the board. Leora was a quick learner, her sharp mind grasping the strategies with surprising speed. By the end of the game, she had actually managed to put Rowan in check. You let me win, she accused, though there was a hint of a smile on her lips. I did not, Rowan lied. Leora laughed, a soft, tentative sound, but genuine. It was the first time Rowan had heard her laugh. But not everyone was pleased with Leora's presence in the castle. Whispers followed her through the corridors whenever she ventured out. Servants stared. Warriors muttered. A few even openly challenged her right to be there. Why is the Alpha wasting his time on a failed wolf? One young warrior demanded loudly in the training yard. She's useless. Rowan, who had been overseeing drills nearby, turned slowly. The warrior, a brash wolf named Kyle, froze when he realized the Alpha King had heard him. Repeat that, Rowan said quietly. Kale's bravado faltered. I was just saying, you were questioning my judgment. No, Your Majesty, I only meant you meant exactly what you said. Rowan's voice was calm, dangerously calm. You think Leora is useless, weak, unworthy of my attention. Kale stammered something incoherent. Rowan stepped closer. Let me make something very clear. Leora Vale has survived 7 years of torture that would have broken most of the wolves in this pack. She has more strength in her smallest finger than you have in your entire body. And if I ever hear you disrespect her again, I will personally ensure you regret it. Am I understood? Kyle's face went white. Yes, Your Majesty. Good. Now get back to work. Kale fled. Marcus appeared at Rowan's side. You're making this harder than it needs to be. How so? By defending her so publicly. It's making people talk. Let them talk, Marcus sighed. Rowan, I understand why you're doing this, but you need to be careful. The council is already uneasy. If they start to think you're showing favoritism, I don't care what they think, Rowan said flatly. Marcus studied him for a long moment. You care about her. Rowan's jaw tightened. She's a member of my pack. Of course I care. That's not what I meant. Rowan said nothing. Marcus shook his head slowly. Just be careful, Rowan. You're walking a dangerous line. Bosk. That night, Rowan found Leora in the castle library. She was curled up in an oversized chair near the fireplace, a thick book balanced on her knees. She looked up when he entered, startled. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean to intrude. You're not intruding, Rowan said, settling into the chair across from her. This library belongs to the entire pack. You have as much right to be here as anyone. Leora relaxed slightly. I've never been in here before. It's beautiful. Rowan glanced around at the towering shelves lined with leather-bound volumes. My mother used to spend hours in here. She loved stories. Your mother? Leora's voice was soft. She died when I was 16, Rowan said quietly. Illness. It spread through the pack that winter and took a lot of people with it. I'm sorry, Rowan shrugged. It was a long time ago. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound the crackling of the fire. Can I ask you something? Leora said hesitantly. Of course. Why did you help me? Rowan looked at her, surprised. What do you mean? You could have ignored me, sent me back to my father, pretended you never saw me in the kitchen that night. Leora's voice trembled slightly. But you didn't. You risked everything, your counsel, your beta, your reputation, for someone who's nothing. You're not nothing, Rowan said fiercely. I'm a failed wolf who can't even shift. You're a survivor. Rowan leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. You endured 7 years of hell, and you're still here, still fighting. That takes more courage than most wolves will ever have. Leora's eyes filled with tears. I don't feel courageous. You don't have to feel it. You just have to keep going. A tear slipped down her cheek. What if I can't? Then I'll be here to catch you when you fall, Rowan said softly. Leora stared at him, her breath catching. For a moment, something passed between them, something fragile and terrifying and undeniable. Then Leora looked away, her cheeks flushing. Thank you. Rowan rose to his feet, suddenly needing distance. Get some rest. Tomorrow, I want you to start training. Leora's head snapped up. Training? You can't hide in this castle forever. You need to learn to defend yourself, to be strong. But I can't shift. You don't need to shift to fight, Rowan said firmly. Trust me. Leora looked uncertain, but she nodded. Okay. Rowan left before he could say something foolish. The training began the next morning. Rowan assigned Marcus as Leora's instructor, much to the second's displeasure. She's never held a weapon in her life, Marcus protested. This is going to be a disaster. Then make it less of a disaster, Rowan said. Teach her. Marcus grumbled, but obeyed. The first session was brutal. Leora had no muscle tone, no stamina, no combat instincts whatsoever. Marcus started with basic footwork and had to stop every 5 minutes because she was gasping for air. But she didn't quit, even when her legs shook with exhaustion, even when she stumbled and fell, even when other warriors in the yard snickered at her clumsy attempts. She got back up. Rowan watched from the sidelines, his chest tight with something he couldn't name. After an hour, Marcus finally called a halt. Leora collapsed onto a bench, drenched in sweat and trembling. Marcus crouched beside her. You did well. Leora laughed weakly. I can barely stand. That's normal. It gets easier. When? In about 6 months. Leora groaned. Marcus's scarred face softened into something that might have been a smile. You've got grit, girl. I'll give you that. But danger was brewing beyond the castle walls. In the Northern Territories, rival Alpha Darius Ashcroft watched the chaos in the Blackthorn pack with keen interest. Darius was a brutal wolf who ruled through fear and violence. He had been testing Blackthorn's borders for months, probing for weakness. And now, with Garrick exiled and the council divided, he saw his opportunity. The Alpha King has gone soft, Darius told his warriors as they gathered around a fire deep in the northern forest. He's more concerned with protecting some pathetic servant girl than defending his territory. His second, a vicious wolf named Rafe, grinned. So we strike? We strike, Darius confirmed, but not openly, not yet. First, we test them, see how they respond. He gestured to a map spread across a nearby log. There's a patrol route here, along the eastern ridge. Small group. Easy target. We hit them hard, leave no survivors, and disappear before reinforcements arrive. When? Rafe asked. 3 nights from now, when the moon is dark. The warriors howled their approval. Back at Blackthorn Castle, Rowan stood on the battlements, staring out at the dark forest. Something felt wrong. His instincts were screaming at him, but he couldn't pinpoint the threat. Marcus joined him. You feel it too? Something's coming, Rowan said quietly. War? Maybe. Marcus was silent for a moment. The pack isn't ready. We're divided. Weak. I know. Then what are we going to do? Rowan's hands clenched into fists. We're going to survive, no matter what it takes. Far below, in the training yard, Leora was still practicing, even in the darkness. Even though every muscle in her body screamed in protest, she refused to quit. And as Rowan watched her, something shifted deep in his chest. She was stronger than anyone realized, including herself. The attack came on the third night, exactly as Darius had planned. Rowan was in his study reviewing border reports when the alarm bells began to ring. The sound tore through the castle like a scream, 3 rapid peals followed by 2 long ones. Ambush, Eastern Ridge. Rowan was moving before the echoes faded. He burst from his study and took the stairs 3 at a time, Marcus already falling into step beside him. How many? Rowan demanded. Unknown, Marcus replied grimly. The patrol was 8 wolves. They're not responding to the link. That meant they were either unconscious or dead. Rowan's wolf surged forward, demanding release. He shoved through the main doors into the courtyard where warriors were already assembling. 30 wolves in various states of readiness, strapping on weapons and armor with practiced efficiency. With me, Rowan commanded. Full combat formation. Assume hostile forces larger than ours. The warriors howled acknowledgement. Rowan began to shift, his bones cracking and reforming as his wolf pushed to the surface. Around him, the others followed suit. Within seconds, 30 massive wolves stood ready, their eyes glowing in the darkness. They ran. The castle fell away behind them as they raced through the forest. Rowan led the charge, his powerful legs eating up the distance with ground-shaking strides. The Eastern Ridge was 5 miles away. At this pace, they would reach it in minutes. But minutes could mean the difference between rescue and recovery. The link between pack members, the psychic thread that connected every wolf to their alpha, was eerily silent where the patrol should have been. Rowan pushed harder, fear turning his blood to ice. They burst through the tree line onto the ridge. The scene that greeted them was carnage. Bodies lay scattered across the rocky ground. Blood pooled in the crevices between stones, still steaming in the cold air. The scent of death was overwhelming. Pack members, yes, but also the acrid stink of enemy wolves. Rowan shifted back to human form, his chest heaving. Around him, his warriors did the same. Spread out, Marcus ordered quietly. Check for survivors. The warriors moved through the massacre with grim efficiency. Rowan crouched beside the nearest body, a young wolf named Thomas who had joined the pack only 2 years earlier. His throat had been torn out. His eyes stared sightlessly at the stars. Rowan's hands clenched into fists. Your Majesty. Rowan turned. One of the warriors, a female named Cassandra, stood near the edge of the ridge, her face pale. We found one alive. Rowan crossed the distance in 3 strides. A wolf lay crumpled against a boulder, barely conscious. It was Finn, one of the patrol leaders. His leg was bent at an unnatural angle, and deep claw marks raked across his chest. Finn, Rowan said sharply. Who did this? Finn's eyes focused with difficulty. When he spoke, his voice was a rattling wheeze. Ashcroft, Darius Ashcroft, 20 warriors, maybe more. They knew we were coming, knew our route. Ice flooded Rowan's veins. Someone told them. Finn nodded weakly. Ambush. We never had a chance. How did you survive? Played dead. They left me when the alarm went up. Finn coughed, blood flecking his lips. Your Majesty, this wasn't random. They were testing us, seeing how fast we'd respond. Rowan's jaw clenched. They're planning something bigger. War, Finn whispered. They're coming for the castle. Marcus appeared at Rowan's shoulder. We need to move him. He won't last without a healer. Rowan nodded curtly. Get him back to Elara. The rest of you secure the perimeter. I want patrols doubled on every border. No one sleeps until I know we're safe. The warriors scattered to obey. Rowan remained on the ridge, staring out at the dark forest. Somewhere out there, Darius Ashcroft was watching, waiting, and someone in Rowan's own pack had betrayed them. Lars. By the time Rowan returned to the castle, dawn was breaking over the mountains. He was exhausted, covered in blood that wasn't his own, and burning with a fury that threatened to consume him. He went directly to the infirmary. Elara was bent over Finn, her hands glowing faintly with healing energy. The injured wolf was unconscious but breathing steadily. "Will he live?" Rowan asked quietly. "Yes," Alara said without looking up, "but he won't walk properly for months. That leg is shattered in 3 places." Rowan closed his eyes briefly. 7 dead, 1 crippled, all because someone had sold them out. "I need to know who the traitor is," Rowan said. "So do I." Alara's voice was tight with anger. "But right now, I have patients to tend. You should rest, Your Majesty. You look like death." "I'm fine." "You're not." Alara finally looked at him, her expression stern. "When was the last time you slept?" Rowan couldn't remember. "Go," Alara said firmly. "That's an order from your healer." Rowan wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. He was running on fumes. If he didn't rest soon, he would collapse. He left the infirmary and made his way through the castle corridors. Servants pressed themselves against the walls as he passed, their eyes wide with fear. Word of the attack had spread quickly. Rowan climbed the stairs toward his chambers, his body moving on autopilot. He passed the guest wing and slowed. Leora's door was slightly ajar. Against his better judgment, Rowan pushed it open. The room was empty. The bed was made. A book lay open on the desk, one of the volumes from the library. Where was she? Rowan turned and nearly collided with a servant. "Have you seen Leora Vale?" he demanded. The servant, a young woman named Petra, shook her head quickly. "No, Your Majesty, but I heard she went to the training yard early this morning, before the alarm." The training yard. Rowan changed direction, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. He found her exactly where Petra had said. The yard was empty except for Leora, who stood in the center with a wooden practice sword gripped in both hands. Her face was set in concentration as she went through the basic forms Marcus had taught her. She was terrible at it. Her footwork was clumsy, her strikes lacked power, and she nearly dropped the sword twice. But she didn't stop. Rowan leaned against the doorway, watching. Leora completed the sequence and started again from the beginning. Sweat dripped down her face despite the cold. Her arms trembled with exhaustion. "You should rest," Rowan said quietly. Leora jumped, spinning around. When she saw him, her eyes widened. "Your Majesty, I heard about the attack. Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." "You're covered in blood." "None of it's mine." Rowan stepped into the yard. "What are you doing out here?" Leora's gaze dropped to the practice sword in her hands. "Training. I thought, if there's going to be a war, I should be ready." "You've been training for 3 weeks. You're not ready." "I know." Leora's voice was small. "But I can't just hide while people are dying. I have to do something." Rowan studied her, this small, scarred girl who had been beaten down her entire life and still refused to give up. "Show me what you've learned," he said. Leora blinked. "What?" "The basic forms. Show me." Hesitantly, Leora raised the practice sword and began the sequence. Her movements were jerky and uncertain, but there was a raw determination in her eyes that hadn't been there before. When she finished, Rowan stepped closer. "Your stance is too narrow," he said, "and you're gripping the sword too tightly. Here." He moved behind her and adjusted her hands on the hilt, his fingers warm against her cold skin. Leora went very still. "Relax your shoulders," Rowan murmured. "Weapons are an extension of your body. If you're tense, they won't move properly." Leora exhaled slowly, her muscles loosening slightly. "Better. Now try again." She went through the forms once more, and this time her strikes were smoother. Not perfect, but improved. "Good," Rowan said. Leora turned to face him, her cheeks flushed. "Thank you." Their eyes met, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them. Then reality crashed back in. "You should get cleaned up," Rowan said, stepping back, "and eat something. You can't train on an empty stomach." Leora nodded quickly. "Yes, Your Majesty." She hurried away, leaving Rowan alone in the yard. He stood there for a long time, trying to ignore the way his heart had raced when she'd looked at him. But the council convened that afternoon. The atmosphere was electric with tension. News of the attack had shaken the pack to its core. 7 warriors dead, a coordinated ambush, an enemy at the gates, and worst of all, a traitor in their midst. "We need to identify the spy immediately," Elder Thaddeus declared, before more blood is spilled. Agreed, said Elder Corinne. But how? We have no evidence, no witnesses. Someone knew the patrol route, Marcus said grimly. Only a handful of wolves had access to that information. Are you suggesting one of us is the traitor? Demanded Elder Corbin, a heavy-set wolf with a scarred jaw. I'm suggesting we need to investigate everyone, Marcus replied coldly. The council erupted into argument. Rowan let them shout for exactly 60 seconds before slamming his fist on the table. Silence fell. Enough, Rowan said, his voice deadly quiet. We don't have time for this. Darius Ashcroft is planning a larger assault. We need to prepare. With what forces? Thaddeus asked bitterly. We're undermanned and divided. Half the pack still thinks you made a mistake exiling Garrick. Garrick was a monster, Rowan interrupted. Perhaps, but he was also a brilliant strategist, and now he's gone, and we're vulnerable. Then we'll have to be smarter, Rowan said flatly. Marcus, I want every defensive position reinforced. Double the guard rotations. No one enters or leaves the territory without my personal authorization. Marcus nodded. And the traitor? Corinne pressed. We flush them out, Rowan said. We feed false information through different channels and see which one leaks. It was a sound plan, but even as Rowan outlined the details, he could feel the council's doubt like a physical weight. They didn't trust him. Not anymore. The meeting adjourned with nothing resolved and everything uncertain. Over the next week, tension in the castle became suffocating. Warriors jumped at shadows. Servants whispered in corners. The council met in closed sessions that Rowan was pointedly not invited to. And through it all, Leora trained. Every morning before dawn, she was in the yard. Every evening after the castle had settled, she was there again. Marcus worked with her when he could, but increasingly it was Rowan who served as her instructor. He told himself it was practical. She needed to learn. He needed the distraction, but the truth was more complicated. He found himself looking for excuses to spend time with her, to hear her laugh when she finally landed a clean strike, to watch the way her eyes lit up when she mastered a new technique. You're getting better, Rowan told her one evening as they sparred with wooden swords. Leora grinned, breathless. I almost got past your guard that time. Almost doesn't count in real combat. Then I'll have to keep practicing. Their blades met with a sharp crack. Leora pivoted, trying to use her smaller size to her advantage, but Rowan anticipated the move and swept her legs out from under her. She hit the ground hard, the breath leaving her lungs in a whoosh. Rowan immediately crouched beside her. Are you hurt? Leora wheezed out a laugh. Just my pride. He offered his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet. For a moment, they stood close enough that Rowan could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Her hand was still in his. Leora, he began. The castle's talking about you, she interrupted quietly. About us. Rowan's jaw tightened. I know. They think you're showing favoritism, that you're distracted. Do you think I'm distracted? Leora met his gaze steadily. I think you're trying to do the right thing, and people hate that. Not all people. No, she agreed softly. Not all. The moment stretched between them, fragile and dangerous. Then Leora stepped back, breaking the spell. I should go. It's late. Leora. Good night, Your Majesty. She left before he could respond. Rowan stood alone in the yard, his chest tight with frustration. He was the Alpha King. He could not afford distractions. But every time he tried to push Leora from his mind, she came roaring back. The attack came 3 nights later. Rowan woke to the sound of screaming. He was on his feet instantly, his wolf surging to the surface. He grabbed his sword from beside the bed and threw open the door. The corridor was chaos. Servants ran in every direction, their faces twisted with terror. Smoke billowed up from the lower levels. Fire! Someone shrieked. Fire in the east wing! Rowan sprinted toward the stairs. Marcus appeared from a side corridor, already armed. It's not just fire, Marcus shouted over the noise. We're under attack. Ashcroft's wolves breached the south gate. How? Someone opened it from the inside. The traitor. Rowan's vision went red. They reached the main hall just as enemy wolves poured through the shattered doors. 20 of them, maybe more, their eyes glowing with bloodlust. Rowan shifted mid-stride. His wolf form exploded outward, massive and black as midnight. He slammed into the nearest enemy wolf with bone-crushing force, his jaws closing around the creature's throat. Blood sprayed across the stone floor. Marcus fought beside him, his sword flashing in the firelight. Around them, Blackthorn warriors rallied, throwing themselves into the fray. But the enemy kept coming. Rowan tore through wolf after wolf, his mind focused on a single objective: protect the pack, protect his home, protect Leora. The thought struck him like lightning. Leora was in the guest wing, the east wing, where the fire had started. Rowan broke away from the battle and ran. He shifted back to human form as he took the stairs, his feet pounding against stone. Smoke was thicker here, choking and black. "Leora!" he roared. No answer. He reached her door and kicked it open. The room was empty. The window hung open, cold wind billowing the curtains. Rowan's heart stopped. Had she escaped? Or had someone taken her? He leaned out the window. Below in the courtyard, he could see figures moving through the smoke. And there, a flash of dark hair. Leora. She wasn't fleeing. She was running toward the battle. "No," Rowan breathed. He vaulted out the window, shifting in midair. He hit the ground on 4 legs and sprinted after her. Leora burst into the main hall just as a massive enemy wolf lunged at Marcus from behind. She didn't think. She grabbed a fallen sword, too heavy for her, too unwieldy, and swung it with all her strength. The blade caught the wolf across the ribs. It wasn't a killing blow, but it was enough to knock the creature off course. Marcus spun and drove his own blade through the wolf's heart. He stared at Leora in shock. "What are you doing here?" "Helping!" Leora shouted. Another wolf charged at her. Leora raised the sword, but she was too slow. A massive black shape slammed into the enemy wolf, driving it to the ground. Rowan. He stood over her, his fur bristling, his eyes blazing with fury. He snarled at her, a clear command. "Run!" But Leora didn't run. Instead, something inside her snapped. She felt it, a presence deep within her chest that she had thought was lost forever. Her wolf, weak and damaged, but alive, and it was clawing its way to the surface. Leora gasped as pain lanced through her body. Her bones began to shift, her skin rippled. No, it wasn't possible. She couldn't shift. She had been poisoned. But the wolf didn't care about poison or possibility. It only cared about survival. Leora screamed as her body tore itself apart and rebuilt itself into something new. Fur sprouted across her skin, her spine elongated, her teeth sharpened into fangs. And then, for the first time in her life, Leora Vale stood on 4 legs. She was smaller than the other wolves, leaner. Her fur was pale silver rather than the dark shades common to Blackthorn wolves. But she was whole. Rowan shifted back to human form, his eyes wide with shock. "Leora?" The silver wolf, Leora, turned her head toward him. Her eyes were the same brilliant green they had always been. An enemy wolf lunged at Rowan from the side. Leora moved faster than thought. She threw herself at the attacker, her jaws closing around its foreleg. The enemy yelped in pain and thrashed, but Leora held on. Rowan recovered quickly. He shifted back to wolf form, and together they brought the enemy down. The battle raged around them, but for one heartbeat, Rowan and Leora stood side by side. And everyone saw the failed wolf, the broken servant, the girl who should have been nothing. She had transformed. The enemy forces faltered, confused by this new development, and in that moment of hesitation, the Blackthorn warriors surged forward with renewed strength. The tide of battle turned. By the time dawn broke, the enemy had been driven back. 12 Ashcroft wolves lay dead. The rest had fled into the forest. Rowan stood in the wreckage of the great hall, his chest heaving. Blood and ash covered everything. Marcus approached, limping slightly. "We lost 4 warriors, another dozen injured, but we held." "The traitor?" Rowan demanded. Marcus's expression was grim. "We found him. Elder Corbin. He's the one who opened the gate." Rowan's hands clenched into fists. "Where is he?" "In the dungeons." Rowan turned to go, but Marcus caught his arm. "Rowan, the girl." She shifted. "I know." "How?" "I don't know." Rowan's voice was rough. "But we'll figure it out." He found Leora in the infirmary, sitting on a cot with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She had shifted back to human form, and someone had found her clean clothes. She looked up when he entered, her green eyes bright with exhaustion and something else, hope. "You did it," Rowan said softly. Leora's breath hitched. "I didn't think I could. I know what you thought. But you were wrong." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "My wolf. She's still there. After all this time, she's still there." Rowan crouched in front of her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You saved Marcus's life tonight. You saved mine. I couldn't let them hurt you." The words hung between them, raw and honest. Rowan's thumb brushed across her cheek, wiping away a tear. "Leora, your Majesty!" A warrior burst into the infirmary, his face pale. "The council demands an emergency session, now." Rowan closed his eyes briefly. "Tell them I'll be there shortly." The warrior hesitated. "They said to bring the girl." Leora went rigid. Rowan's voice dropped to a lethal growl. "Why?" "They're calling for a trial." "A trial for what?" The warrior swallowed hard. "Witchcraft, Your Majesty. They think she used dark magic to force her transformation." Rowan's wolf surged forward, fangs bared at the mere suggestion. "Get out!" The warrior stumbled backward, eyes wide with fear. "Your Majesty, I said get out!" Rowan's voice shook the stone walls. The warrior fled. Silence fell over the infirmary. Leora sat frozen on the cot, her face drained of all color. "Witchcraft," she whispered. "They think I'm a witch." "You're not." Rowan's voice was steel. "And I won't let them do this to you." "They'll demand proof. Evidence." Leora's hands trembled in her lap. "How do I prove I'm not something I'm not?" Rowan's jaw clenched. She was right. Accusations of dark magic were nearly impossible to disprove. The burden of proof fell entirely on the accused, and the council could twist any explanation to fit their narrative. "We go together," Rowan said firmly. "We face them together." "Rowan." Alara appeared from behind a privacy curtain, her expression grave. "If you defend her too strongly, they'll use it against you both. They already whisper that she's bewitched you." "Let them whisper." "They're not just whispering anymore, they're screaming." Alara moved closer, her voice dropping. "Half the council wants you dethroned. They're using this girl as evidence that you've lost your judgment. If you push too hard—" "Then I push too hard," Rowan interrupted coldly. "I will not abandon her." Alara's eyes softened. "I know. But you need to be strategic. Give them what they want, a trial. Let Leora prove herself on their terms. It's the only way to silence them permanently." Rowan turned to Leora. "Can you do that? Can you face them?" Leora's green eyes were haunted, but she lifted her chin. "What choice do I have?" "You always have a choice." "No," Leora said quietly. "I stopped having choices the day my father poisoned me. But now I have a chance to take them back." She stood, the blanket falling from her shoulders. "I'll face the trial. I'll prove I'm not what they think I am." Pride swelled in Rowan's chest. This girl had been beaten, starved, and broken. Yet here she stood, ready to walk into the lion's den with her head held high. "Then we do this properly," Rowan said, "by ancient law." Alara's eyes widened. "The trials of worth? Rowan, no one's invoked those in over a century." "Then it's time we remembered our traditions." Rowan's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "If the council wants proof of Leora's worth, they'll get it. 3 trials. Wisdom, strength, and heart. Pass all 3, and no one can question her place in this pack ever again." "And if she fails?" Alara asked quietly. "She won't." But even as Rowan said the words, doubt gnawed at his gut. The trials of worth were brutal by design. They had been created in the old days to test potential lunas, to ensure that anyone who stood beside an alpha possessed not just power, but the qualities necessary to lead. Most candidates failed, and failure meant exile. Leora seemed to understand the stakes. Her face had gone pale again, but her voice remained steady. "When do the trials begin?" "Tomorrow at sunset," Rowan said. "That gives us 24 hours to prepare." "Prepare for what?" I don't even know what the trials are.
Neither do I, Rowan admitted. The council chooses them. They're designed to test your greatest weaknesses. Leora's laugh was hollow. Then they'll have plenty to work with.
The council chamber was packed when they arrived the next evening. Every elder sat in their designated seats, their faces carved from stone. But beyond the circle of council members, warriors and pack members lined the walls, witnesses to whatever was about to unfold. Rowan scanned the crowd and felt his blood run cold. This wasn't just a trial. This was a spectacle. The council wanted everyone to see Leora fail. Leora walked beside him, her spine straight despite the tremors he could feel running through her body. She wore simple clothing, dark trousers, and a gray tunic that Alara had provided. No armor, no weapons, just a girl facing judgment. Elder Thaddeus rose from his seat, his gaunt frame casting long shadows in the torchlight. Leora Vale, you stand accused of using forbidden magic to force a transformation that should have been impossible. How do you plead? Not guilty, Leora said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. The evidence suggests otherwise, Thaddeus continued. You failed your first transformation 7 years ago. The pack healer documented your inability to shift. Yet last night, in the midst of battle, you suddenly manifested a wolf form. Explain this impossibility. Leora took a breath. I was poisoned during my first transformation. The substance my father gave me damaged my wolf, but it didn't destroy her. She was always there, just trapped. Last night, when I thought I was going to die, when I thought Alpha Rowan was going to die, she broke free. Convenient, muttered Elder Corbin from his seat. Then he seemed to remember he was in chains for treason and fell silent. Elder Corinne leaned forward. Fear-induced transformation has been documented before, but only in wolves who possessed latent shifting ability. You were tested, child. You had nothing. The test was wrong, Leora said simply. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Thaddeus raised a hand for silence. Whether the test was wrong or you employed dark magic, the result is the same. You have disrupted the natural order. The council has therefore invoked the ancient trials of worth. Leora's hands clenched at her sides, but she nodded. I accept. Do you understand what you're accepting? Thaddeus's voice was sharp. These trials will test you beyond anything you've endured. They will strip you bare and expose every weakness. And if you fail even one, she understands, Rowan interrupted. Get on with it. Thaddeus's eyes narrowed, but he inclined his head. Very well. The first trial begins now, the trial of wisdom. 2 warriors stepped forward carrying a large wooden chest. They placed it at Leora's feet and retreated. Inside this chest, Thaddeus explained, are 3 locked boxes. Each contains a different item. One will save your life, one will kill you, one will condemn everyone you love to death. You must choose which box to open based solely on the riddles inscribed on each lock. Choose wisely. Leora's face went white. And if I choose wrong, then you live with the consequences. The crowd pressed closer, craning to see. Rowan wanted to intervene, to demand they stop this madness, but he forced himself to remain still. This was Leora's battle to fight. Leora knelt beside the chest and opened the lid. Inside were 3 ornate boxes made of different materials, one of silver, one of gold, one of blackened iron. Each had a riddle carved into its surface in ancient script. Leora leaned close, squinting at the words. Rowan realized with a jolt that she was struggling to read them. Of course, she'd been kept from education, forced to work in the kitchens her entire life. But Leora didn't ask for help. She traced each letter with her finger, sounding out the words silently. Minutes passed. The crowd grew restless. Finally, Leora sat back on her heels. The silver box says, I am taken from a mine and shut up in a wooden case from which I am never released. What am I? The answer is pencil lead, but that's a trick. Pencil lead is graphite, not silver. This box is lying about its contents. Impressed silence greeted her words. The gold box says, I have cities but no houses, forests but no trees, water but no fish. What am I? A map. Maps show you where to go but don't give you everything you need to survive. This box offers guidance but not salvation. Leora's fingers moved to the iron box. The iron box says, I am always hungry and must be fed. The finger I touch will soon turn red.
What am I? Fire. Fire destroys, but it also purifies. It kills what is rotten so new things can grow. She looked up at Thaddeus. The silver box will kill me. It's filled with poison disguised as a medicine. The gold box contains nothing of real value, just empty promises. But the iron box. She lifted it carefully. The iron box holds the truth, even if that truth burns. Thaddeus's expression remained impassive. Open it. Leora's hands shook as she worked the ancient lock. It clicked open. She lifted the lid. Inside was a simple iron pendant shaped like a wolf, and wrapped around it was a piece of parchment. Leora unfolded the parchment and read aloud. Wisdom is not knowing all the answers. It is knowing which questions to ask. You have passed the first trial. The crowd exhaled collectively. Rowan felt something tight in his chest loosen. 1 down, 2 to go. But Thaddeus wasn't finished. The trial of wisdom is complete. We move immediately to the trial of strength. Now? Leora's voice cracked. But I need— The trials do not wait for your convenience, Thaddeus said coldly. Strength means enduring when you have nothing left to give. Warriors cleared the center of the chamber, pushing back the crowd to create a wide circle. At Thaddeus's signal, a massive wolf stepped forward. Rowan recognized him immediately. Darius, a seasoned fighter known for his brutality in combat. He was twice Leora's size and had decades of battle experience. You will fight, Thaddeus announced. Shifted or unshifted, the choice is yours. The fight continues until one of you yields or dies. This is insane, Rowan snarled. She's barely trained. The trial has been set, Thaddeus said. Unless you wish to forfeit on her behalf? Leora turned to Rowan, her green eyes blazing. No, I can do this. Leora, I have to. She stripped off her tunic, standing in just a thin undershirt. If I don't, they'll never stop. They'll always see me as weak. She was right. Rowan knew she was right, but watching her step into that circle felt like watching someone walk to their execution. Darius shifted immediately, his massive brown wolf form rippling with muscle and old scars. He growled, a low, menacing sound that promised violence. Leora closed her eyes and reached for her wolf. The transformation was faster this time, less painful. Within seconds, she stood on 4 legs, her silver fur gleaming in the torchlight. But she was so small compared to Darius, so fragile. Darius didn't give her time to prepare. He lunged. Leora barely dodged, throwing herself sideways. Darius's jaws snapped shut on empty air. He rounded on her, faster than something his size had any right to be. The crowd roared. Leora tried to stay out of reach, using her smaller size to dart between his attacks. But she was tiring quickly, and Darius knew it. He feinted left, then struck right. His shoulder slammed into Leora's flank, sending her tumbling across the stone floor. She yelped, a sound of pain that made Rowan's vision go red. He started to move forward, but Marcus grabbed his arm. Don't. If you interfere, she automatically fails. She's going to die, Rowan growled. Then she dies, proving she's worthy, Marcus said quietly. That's what she chose. Leora struggled to her feet, blood dripping from a gash on her shoulder. Darius circled her, taking his time now, savoring the kill. He lunged again. But this time Leora didn't dodge. She dropped low and drove upward, using Darius's own momentum against him. Her smaller body slipped beneath his guard, and her teeth found the soft flesh of his exposed throat. Not a killing bite, just enough to draw blood, just enough to prove she could have ended him if she'd wanted to. Darius froze. Leora released him and backed away, her sides heaving. For a long moment, the two wolves stared at each other. Then Darius lowered his head and shifted back to human form. I yield. The chamber erupted. Some wolves howled in approval. Others shouted in outrage. The council members looked stunned. Leora shifted back, collapsing to her knees. Blood ran down her arm from the gash in her shoulder, and she was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. But she was alive. Rowan was at her side in an instant, pulling her against his chest. You did it! You actually did it! One more, Leora gasped. Just one more trial. Elder Corinne stood. Her expression was unreadable. The third trial is the trial of heart. By tradition, this trial must strike at the deepest fear of the candidate.
It must force them to choose between what they want and what is right. Rowan's blood turned to ice. What do you have planned? Corinne's smile was thin. We bring back the exiled Beta. We give Lyora a blade, and we see if she has the courage to execute the man who destroyed her life. The chamber went silent. Leora's entire body went rigid against Rowan. My father, she whispered. You want me to kill my father. Not kill, Thaddeus corrected. Execute. There is a difference. Garrick Vale committed crimes against you in this pack. Justice demands his death. The question is whether you possess the strength of heart to deliver it. This is barbaric, Rowan said, his voice shaking with fury. This is tradition, Thaddeus replied. And tradition is what separates us from rogues and savages. If Leora truly belongs in this pack, she must prove she can make the hard choices, even when those choices break her heart. Leora pulled away from Rowan and stood on trembling legs. Bring him. Leora, you don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Her voice was stronger now, steadier. If I don't, this never ends. They'll always question whether I deserve to be here, whether I deserve to stand beside you. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Rowan wanted to argue, to forbid this madness, but he saw the determination in Lyora's eyes and knew that nothing he said would change her mind. Warriors left the chamber and returned minutes later dragging a man in chains. Garrick Vale looked like he'd aged a decade in the weeks since his exile. His face was gaunt, his hair unkempt, his eyes wild. But when he saw Leora, those eyes filled with familiar contempt. Look at you, he spat, playing dress-up as a real wolf. Did you bewitch the Alpha King into protecting you? Is that how you— Silence, Corinne commanded. Garrick Vale, you stand accused of child abuse, torture, attempted murder, and high treason against the pack. The penalty is death. Your daughter has been given the honor of carrying out your sentence. Garrick's laugh was bitter and broken. My daughter. That pathetic creature was never worthy to be called my daughter. She's weak, defective, a stain on the Vale name. Leora's hands clenched into fists, but she said nothing. A warrior pressed a silver blade into her palm. The metal gleamed in the torchlight, sharp, deadly, final. All you have to do, Thaddeus said softly, is drive that blade through his heart. One thrust, and the trial is complete. Justice will be served, and no one will ever question your place in this pack again. Leora stared at the blade, then at her father. Garrick met her gaze with defiance. You don't have the courage. You never did. That's why I tried to fix you, to make you strong, but you were always too weak. I was a child, Leora said quietly, a child who needed her father's love, not his fists. Love? Garrick sneered. Love is for the soft. I tried to teach you that, but you refused to learn. Leora stepped closer. The blade trembled in her hand. The crowd pressed forward, hungry to see blood. Rowan's heart pounded. He knew what the council wanted. They wanted Lyora to kill Garrick, to prove she could be ruthless when necessary. But Rowan also knew that if Lyora drove that blade home, it would destroy something fundamental inside her. She would survive, yes, but she would never be the same. Please, Rowan thought desperately, don't let them change you. Leora raised the blade. Garrick closed his eyes, preparing for death. And then Leora lowered her arm. No, she said. Gasps echoed through the chamber. What? Thaddeus demanded. I said no. Leora's voice was clear and steady. I won't kill him. You fail the trial then, Corinne said. You condemn yourself to— I don't fail anything, Leora interrupted. You said this was the trial of heart. You said it would test my deepest fear and force me to choose between what I want and what is right. Well, I've made my choice. She turned to face the council, the blade still gripped in her hand but pointed at the ground. What I want is to drive this blade through his heart, to make him suffer the way he made me suffer, to watch the light leave his eyes and know that he can never hurt me again. Leora's voice shook, but she didn't stop. But what's right is not to let him turn me into what he is. What's right is to show mercy even when mercy isn't deserved, because that's what real strength looks like. Not vengeance, not brutality, but the courage to be better than the people who broke you. The chamber was utterly silent. Leora held out the blade to Rowan. If justice demands his death, then let someone else carry it out. But I won't. I won't let him take anything else from me, not even my soul. Rowan took the blade from her trembling hand. Pride swelled in his chest so powerfully that it was almost painful. This girl, this broken, scarred, beautiful girl, had just done something that most warriors twice her age couldn't do. She had shown mercy to her greatest enemy. Elder Thaddeus stood slowly. For the first time since Rowan had known him, the old wolf looked genuinely moved. "In all my years," he said quietly, "I have never witnessed such courage." He turned to the council. "The trial of heart does not require killing. It requires the candidate to face their deepest fear and choose the righteous path, even when that path is harder than the alternative. Leora Vale chose mercy over vengeance, compassion over cruelty. In doing so, she has demonstrated a strength of heart that few possess." Thaddeus's voice rose, carrying to every corner of the chamber. "The trials are complete. Leora Vale has passed all three. By ancient law, no one may question her worth or her place in this pack ever again." The chamber erupted in chaos. Some wolves howled in triumph. Others roared in outrage. But the noise washed over Rowan like water because all he could see was Leora. She was crying. Great, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Rowan pulled her against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head. "You did it. You actually did it." "I thought I'd have to kill him," Leora gasped between sobs. "I thought that was the only way." "You found a better way. Will they really accept me now?" Rowan pulled back just enough to look into her tear-streaked face. "They have to. You passed the trials. That means you're under the pack's protection. Anyone who challenges that challenges me." Leora's laugh was watery and broken. "I can't believe I'm still alive." "You're more than alive," Rowan said softly. "You're free." The feast that night was subdued but significant. By tradition, anyone who passed the trials of worth was honored with a celebration. The pack gathered in the great hall, those who had supported Leora and those who had doubted her alike. Leora sat at Rowan's right hand, a position of honor usually reserved for the beta. Marcus had graciously yielded his seat, claiming he preferred to stand anyway. Warriors approached throughout the evening to offer their respect. Some were genuine. Others were clearly going through the motions. But all of them acknowledged Leora's accomplishment. Even Darius, the wolf she'd fought in the second trial, stopped by their table. "You fight dirty," he said gruffly. "I respect that." Leora's eyes widened. Thank you." Darius grinned. "Train with me sometime. I'll teach you how to fight even dirtier." He walked away, leaving Leora staring after him in shock. "Did that just happen?" she asked. Rowan chuckled. "You earned his respect. That's not easy to do. I thought he'd hate me for beating him." "Warriors respect strength," Marcus said from behind them. "You proved you have it. Now they see you differently." "As what?" "As someone worth following," Marcus said simply. Leora looked down at her plate, overwhelmed. "I don't know how to be that person." "You already are," Rowan said quietly. Their eyes met, and for a moment the crowded hall seemed to fall away. Then Elder Corinne appeared beside the table, breaking the spell. "Your Majesty," she said formally. "A word?" Rowan tensed. "What is it?" Corinne glanced at Leora, then back to Rowan. "Perhaps in private?" "Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of Leora." Corinne's lips thinned, but she nodded. "Very well. The council has been discussing the implications of tonight's trials. Leora passed all three, which by ancient law means she has proven herself worthy of a high position within the pack." "She has," Rowan agreed carefully. "There is only one position that requires all three trials," Corinne continued. "The position of Luna." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Leora's face went pale. I never said... I didn't mean to The trials don't lie," Corinne interrupted. "Whether you intended it or not, you have proven yourself capable of standing beside an alpha. The question now is whether the alpha wishes to claim you." Every eye in the hall turned to Rowan. His heart pounded. This was happening too fast. He cared about Leora, perhaps more than he should, but to make her his Luna now, in front of the entire pack. And yet, what other choice did he have? To reject her now would be to undermine everything she'd just accomplished. It would tell the pack that despite passing the trials, she still wasn't good enough. Rowan stood slowly. The hall fell silent. "Leora Vale," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the space. "You have proven yourself worthy through trials of wisdom, strength, and heart. By ancient law, you have earned the right to stand as Luna of this pack." Leora's eyes were huge, terrified. Rowan continued, "the position of Luna is not just about trials. It's about trust, partnership, a bond that goes deeper than law or tradition." He looked directly at her. "I will not claim you as Luna until you're ready, until you want this as much as the pack demands it." Relief flooded Leora's face, followed quickly by gratitude. But Elder Thaddeus rose from his seat. "Your Majesty, tradition also requires consent," Rowan said sharply. "Or have we forgotten that Lunas are chosen, not commanded?" Thaddeus opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. Rowan turned back to the crowd. "Leora Vale will train as my second Luna. She will learn what it means to lead, and when she is ready, if she is ready, we will revisit this conversation. Until then, anyone who questions her place in this pack answers to me personally." It was a compromise. Not perfect, but enough to satisfy tradition while giving Leora the space she needed. The hall erupted in mixed reactions, but Rowan didn't care. He sat down and leaned close to Leora. "Are you okay?" "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Yes, I did." "They're going to hate you for it." "They already hate me." Rowan's smile was grim. "At least this way I'm hated for the right reasons." Leora's hand found his under the table. Her fingers were cold and trembling, but she held on tight. "Thank you," she said softly. "Always," Rowan replied. And in that moment, sitting in a hall full of wolves who doubted them both, Rowan realized with startling clarity that he was in love with her. The broken girl from the kitchen had become the strongest person he knew, and he would burn the entire world to keep her safe. The realization hit Rowan like a physical blow. He sat frozen in his seat, hands still entwined with Leora's beneath the table, while the feast continued around them in a blur of noise and movement. He was in love with her. Not just protective of her, not just impressed by her courage. He was completely, irrevocably in love with the broken girl who had refused to stay broken. And that terrified him more than any battle ever had. Leora glanced at him, concern flickering across her face. "Are you all right? You look fine," Rowan said too quickly. "I'm fine." She didn't believe him. He could see it in her eyes. But she didn't press, for which he was grateful. The feast wound down as the hour grew late. Warriors drifted away in small groups, their voices carrying through the corridors. The council members departed with stiff formality, their expressions ranging from grudging acceptance to barely concealed fury. Finally, only Rowan, Leora, Marcus, and Alara remained in the great hall. "That went better than expected," Marcus said dryly, pouring himself another cup of mead. "Half the council wants to stage a coup," Rowan replied. "I'd hardly call that better." "They won't," Alara said confidently. "Not after tonight. Leora passed the trials fairly. To challenge that would be to challenge the very foundations of pack law." "Since when has that stopped ambitious wolves?" Rowan muttered. Leora stood abruptly, her chair scraping against stone. "I need air." She left before anyone could respond. Rowan started to follow, but Marcus caught his arm. "Give her space. She's been through hell tonight. That's exactly why I should—" "Rowan." Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. "She needs time to process everything. Let her breathe." Rowan knew his second was right, but every instinct screamed at him to go after her, to make sure she was safe. "She'll be fine," Alara added softly. "The girl is stronger than you think." "I know exactly how strong she is," Rowan said. "That's what worries me." Juan. Leora found herself on the battlements, the same place Rowan had stood weeks ago when he'd first heard her crying in the kitchen. The night was cold and clear. Stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. The forest below was a sea of shadows, dark and endless. Leora wrapped her arms around herself and tried to make sense of everything that had happened. She had passed the trials. She had proven herself worthy. The pack, or at least most of it, had accepted her. So why did she feel so hollow? "Because you don't know what comes next," a voice said behind her. Leora spun.
Elder Corinne stood in the doorway, her silver hair gleaming in the moonlight. "I'm sorry," Leora said quickly. "I didn't mean to intrude. This is your castle now," Corinne interrupted. "You don't need permission to be here." Leora wasn't sure how to respond to that. Corinne moved to stand beside her at the wall. For a moment, they both stared out at the darkness in silence.
"I owe you an apology," Corinne said, finally. Leora's eyes widened. "What?" "I doubted you. I thought you were a distraction, a weakness that would undermine Rowan's authority." Corinne's expression was unreadable. "I was wrong. I don't understand. Tonight, when you chose mercy over vengeance, you showed more strength than most of the warriors in this pack possess." Corinne turned to face her. "You could have killed Garrick. The council expected you to. Some of us wanted you to. But you chose a harder path. That takes real courage." Leora's throat tightened. I didn't want to become like him." "And that is precisely why you deserve to be Luna." Corinne's voice was soft. "This pack needs leaders who understand that strength is not just about violence. It's about knowing when to fight and when to show mercy." "I don't know how to be a Luna," Leora whispered. "Neither did I when I first became an elder," Corinne admitted. "But you learn, and you have people who will help you." "Do I? Half the pack still thinks I'm a witch or a fraud. They'll come around, especially after what's coming." Leora's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Corinne's expression grew grim. "War. Darius Ashcroft won't stop with failed ambushes. He's gathering allies, building an army, and when he strikes again, it will be with everything he has." "When?" "Soon, maybe days, maybe hours." Corinne placed a hand on Leora's shoulder. "Which is why the pack needs you strong and ready, not hiding up here second-guessing yourself." Leora wanted to argue, to explain that she wasn't hiding, just trying to breathe. But Corinne was already walking away. "Rest while you can," the elder called over her shoulder. "Tomorrow, the real work begins." Oh, war came at dawn. Rowan was in the training yard when the alarm bells rang. Not 3 and 2 this time, but a continuous, desperate clanging that meant only one thing: full assault. Warriors poured from the barracks, weapons already in hand. Marcus appeared at Rowan's side, his face grim. "South and East Gate simultaneously," Marcus reported. "At least 50 hostiles, maybe more." "Ashcroft," Rowan growled. "Definitely. They're not even trying to be subtle." Rowan's mind raced. 50 wolves was a significant force, but not insurmountable. Unless it's a diversion, he said suddenly. Marcus's eyes widened. "What?" "Think about it. Ashcroft is brutal, not stupid. He knows we can hold against 50 wolves, but if he splits our forces—" "The North Gate," Marcus breathed. "He's going to hit the North Gate while we're distracted." Rowan was already moving. "Take command of the South defense. I'll handle the North." "You can't go alone." "I won't be alone." Rowan shifted mid-stride, his massive black wolf form bursting through his skin. He threw his head back and howled, a rallying cry that echoed across the castle. From the guest wing, Leora heard the howl and knew immediately what it meant. She threw open her door and ran. Warriors rushed past her in the corridors, most already shifted. She caught fragments of shouted orders. Southgate under attack, enemy forces everywhere. The Alpha King calling for reinforcements. Leora reached the courtyard just as Rowan in wolf form led a group of 20 warriors toward the North Gate. She didn't think. She just ran after them. "Leora!" Alara's voice called from behind. "What are you doing?" "Helping!" Leora shouted back. She reached for her wolf. The transformation was easier now, almost natural. Within seconds, she was running on 4 legs, her silver fur gleaming in the early morning light. She caught up to Rowan's group just as they reached the North Gate. It was already breached. The heavy wooden doors hung off their hinges, splintered by some massive force. Beyond them, enemy wolves poured through like a dark tide. At their head was a massive gray wolf that could only be Darius Ashcroft himself. Rowan didn't hesitate. He charged. The 2 alphas collided with earth-shaking force. Fangs flashed, claws tore. Blood sprayed across the cobblestones. Around them, the battle erupted into chaos. Leora threw herself into the fray without thinking. An enemy wolf lunged at her from the left. She dodged and struck back, her smaller size allowing her to slip beneath his guard. Her teeth found his foreleg. Bone crunched. The wolf yelped and retreated. Another enemy appeared. Then another. Leora fought with desperate intensity, driven by adrenaline and fear and the absolute certainty that if they lost this battle, everyone she cared about would die. Through the chaos, she caught glimpses of Rowan fighting Darius. The two massive wolves were evenly matched, Darius slightly larger, Rowan slightly faster. Neither could gain the upper hand. Then Leora saw it. A third wolf, smaller than Darius but heavily scarred, was circling around behind Rowan, moving into position for a killing strike while Rowan was distracted. Leora's blood turned to ice. She ran. The scarred wolf lunged just as Leora crashed into him from the side. They tumbled across the courtyard in a snarling tangle of teeth and claws. The scarred wolf was stronger, more experienced. He twisted beneath her and sank his fangs into her shoulder. Pain exploded through Leora's body, but she held on. She drove her back legs into the wolf's stomach with all her strength. He released her with a howl of pain. Leora scrambled away, blood streaming from her shoulder. The scarred wolf recovered quickly and charged again. But this time, Rowan was there. The Alpha King slammed into the scarred wolf with devastating force, driving him to the ground. One powerful bite to the throat, and it was over. Rowan turned to Leora, his golden eyes blazing with fury and fear. But there was no time for relief. Darius had used the distraction to rally his forces. The enemy wolves pulled back into a defensive formation near the broken gate. "Retreat!" Darius's voice rang out across the battlefield, harsh and commanding even in wolf form. "Fall back!" The enemy forces obeyed instantly, streaming back through the gate and disappearing into the forest beyond. Within minutes, the courtyard was eerily silent, except for the groans of wounded warriors. Rowan shifted back to human form, breathing hard. Blood streaked his chest and arms, though Leora couldn't tell how much of it was his. "Is everyone all right?" Rowan demanded. Marcus appeared, limping slightly, but alive. "South gate is secure. We lost 6 warriors, another dozen wounded." "North gate?" "4 dead. Leora's injured." Rowan's head snapped toward her. Leora was still in wolf form, favoring her left shoulder where the scarred wolf had bitten her. "Shift back," Rowan ordered. "Let me see." Leora obeyed. The transformation left her dizzy and gasping. She wore only the torn remnants of her sleeping clothes, and blood soaked through the fabric at her shoulder. Rowan was beside her in an instant, his hands gentle as he examined the wound. "It's deep. You need a healer." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're bleeding." "So are you." Rowan blinked, then seemed to notice for the first time that his own wounds were still dripping blood. "I've had worse." "So have I," Leora said quietly. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, recognition of shared pain, shared survival. "You saved my life," Rowan said. "You saved mine first." "That's different." "No," Leora said firmly. "It's not." Elara appeared with supplies and began tending to the wounded without waiting for permission. She worked on Leora's shoulder first, her movements quick and efficient. "You're lucky," Elara muttered. "Another inch to the right, and he would have severed an artery." "Feels real lucky," Leora said through gritted teeth. "Don't be dramatic, you'll live." Rowan paced nearby, his expression dark. "Why did Ashcroft retreat?" "We had him cornered." "He got what he came for," Marcus said grimly. "Which was?" Marcus gestured toward the courtyard where warriors were gathering the dead. "Information. He wanted to see how we'd respond, how quickly we'd mobilize, where our defenses were weakest." This was another test, Rowan realized, and we showed him everything. Marcus's voice was bitter. "Next time he attacks, he'll know exactly where to strike." Rowan's hands clenched into fists. "Then we don't give him a next time. We take the fight to him." The council convened within the hour. Despite their wounds, despite their exhaustion, the elders gathered in the chamber to discuss strategy. "Attacking Ashcroft on his own territory is suicide," Elder Thaddeus argued. "His forces outnumber ours 2-1. "Then we even the odd," Rowan said coldly. "We call in our allies. The Riverside Pack owes us a debt. So does the Mountain Claw Pack." "That will take time," Corinne pointed out. "Time we may not have." "Then we buy time." Rowan turned to Marcus.
Send scouts to track Ashcroft's movements. I want to know where his forces are gathering and when they plan to strike again. And if they strike before our reinforcements arrive, Thaddeus demanded. Then we hold the line, Rowan said simply. We've done it before. We've never faced an enemy this organized, Corinne said. Ashcroft isn't just attacking randomly. He's building toward something, a final assault meant to destroy us completely.
The room fell silent.
Leora, who had been standing quietly near the back of the chamber, spoke up. Then we don't wait for him to be ready. We disrupt his plans. Every eye turned to her. Explain, Rowan said. Leora stepped forward, wincing slightly as her wounded shoulder protested. Ashcroft is gathering allies and building an army. That takes coordination, supply lines, communication. If we can disrupt those things, we weaken him without ever engaging his main force.
Thaddeus frowned. You're suggesting guerrilla tactics. I'm suggesting we be smart instead of just brave, Leora said. Hit his supply convoys, intercept his messengers, make it costly for his allies to support him, force him to stretch his resources thin. Marcus was nodding slowly. It could work. Ashcroft's strength is in his numbers. If we can reduce those numbers before the final battle, we have a chance, Rowan finished. He looked at Leora with something like pride. Where did you learn strategy? I didn't, Leora admitted, but I learned how to survive when I was outnumbered and outmatched. Sometimes you can't win through strength alone. You have to win through persistence. Elder Corinne smiled, a rare, genuine expression. The girl has a point. Then we implement it, Rowan decided. Marcus, organize small strike teams. I want them mobile and fast. Target supply routes first, then communication lines. Make Ashcroft's allies regret supporting him. The council dispersed with renewed purpose. Leora started to follow, but Rowan caught her arm. Stay, please. She stopped, turning back to face him. They were alone in the council chamber now, the torches casting long shadows across the stone walls. That was brilliant, Rowan said quietly. Leora shrugged, then winced as the movement pulled at her injured shoulder. It was just common sense. No, it was leadership. Rowan stepped closer. You saw a problem and offered a solution. That's what Lunas do. Leora's breath caught. Rowan, I know you're not ready to claim the title. I know you need time. But I want you to know that when you are ready, if you are ready, I will be here, waiting. Why? The question burst from Leora before she could stop it. Why me? You could have anyone. Any female in this pack would be honored to stand beside you. So why choose someone who's broken and scarred and doesn't know the first thing about leading? Rowan's expression softened. You're not broken, Leora. You're the strongest person I've ever met, and you don't need to know everything about leading. You just need to care about the people you're protecting, which you already do. Leora's eyes filled with tears. I'm terrified. So am I. Of what? You're the Alpha King. You're not afraid of anything. I'm afraid of losing you, Rowan said quietly. I'm afraid that Ashcroft will attack again, and I won't be fast enough to protect you. I'm afraid that you'll realize you deserve better than a king who let you suffer for years without noticing. That wasn't your fault. It was. Rowan's voice was raw. I should have seen. I should have known. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel invisible again. Leora reached up and touched his face, her palm resting against his scarred jaw. You saved me. When no one else would. When no one else cared. You gave me a chance to be more than what my father said I was. You were always more, Rowan said. I just helped you see it. They stood there for a long moment, the space between them charged with something electric and terrifying and inevitable. Then Leora leaned forward and kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, uncertain, but Rowan responded immediately, his arms coming around her waist to pull her closer. The kiss deepened, became something desperate and necessary. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Leora, Rowan whispered. Don't, she interrupted. Don't say anything you might regret. Not until this is over. Not until we've survived. And if we don't survive, then at least we'll have had this moment. Over the next 2 weeks, the tide of war began to shift. Rowan's strike teams executed Leora's strategy with devastating efficiency. They hit supply convoys traveling to Ashcroft's territory, scattering provisions and leaving enemy forces undersupplied. They intercepted messengers and destroyed communication lines, sowing confusion among Ashcroft's allies. And slowly, agonizingly, those allies began to withdraw their support. The Riverside Pack and Mountain Claw Pack arrived as promised, bringing another 60 warriors to bolster Blackthorn's defenses. Ashcroft's advantage was shrinking, but he wasn't defeated yet. The final battle came on the night of the full moon. Ashcroft threw everything he had at Blackthorn Castle, 200 wolves, the largest force ever assembled in the Northern Territories. They crashed against the castle walls like a living wave. Rowan led the defense from the front lines, his massive black wolf form a beacon of strength that his warriors rallied around. Marcus commanded the eastern flank. The allied packs held the western approaches. And Lyora, silver-furred and fierce, fought beside Rowan, refusing to be left behind. The battle was brutal. Wolves fell on both sides. Blood turned the courtyard stones slick and treacherous, but Blackthorn held hour after hour. They held. And then, just before dawn, something extraordinary happened. Lyora found herself facing 3 enemy wolves at once. She was exhausted, wounded, barely able to stand. They circled her like sharks scenting blood. She knew she was going to die. But instead of fear, she felt something else rising within her, a power she'd never experienced before. It burned through her veins like liquid fire, hot and wild and unstoppable. Her wolf form began to change. Silver fur rippled and grew brighter, almost luminous in the pre-dawn darkness. Her body expanded, muscles swelling with newfound strength. Her eyes blazed with an inner light that made the enemy wolves falter. This was no ordinary transformation. This was something ancient, primal. This was the awakening of an alpha. Lyora threw back her head and howled, a sound that shook the very foundations of the castle and carried across the entire battlefield. Every wolf, friend and enemy alike, froze, because that howl carried undeniable authority, the mark of true power. Lyora had become an alpha in her own right. The 3 enemy wolves attacking her dropped to their bellies in submission, unable to resist the command in her voice. Across the battlefield, Rowan in wolf form stared at her with shock and awe. Darius Ashcroft, still fighting near the gates, heard the howl and understood what it meant. Blackthorn Pack now had 2 alphas. He had already lost. "Retreat!" Darius roared. "Fall back! All forces, retreat!" The enemy wolves obeyed, streaming back through the broken gates and disappearing into the forest. This time, they didn't return. As the sun rose over Blackthorn Castle, Lyora shifted back to human form. She stood in the center of the courtyard, covered in blood and ash, her entire body shaking with exhaustion. Rowan shifted and ran to her, pulling her into his arms before she could collapse. "What just happened?" Lyora whispered. "You awakened," Rowan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your wolf was always meant to be alpha strong. The poison suppressed it, but it couldn't destroy it. And tonight, when you needed that strength most, it finally broke free." "I'm an alpha?" "Yes." Lyora looked around at the warriors gathering in the courtyard. They were staring at her with expressions of shock and respect and something that looked like reverence. "What does this mean?" she asked. Rowan pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "It means you're not just worthy of being Luna. You're capable of being so much more." The bonding ceremony took place 3 nights later beneath the full moon. By ancient tradition, when 2 alphas chose to bond, the entire pack gathered to witness. It was a sacred ritual, a joining not just of 2 individuals, but of 2 equal powers. Lyora stood in the center of the courtyard wearing a simple white dress that Alara had made for her. Her silver hair, no longer matted and dirty, but clean and gleaming, fell in waves down her back. Rowan stood across from her in formal warrior's garb, his expression solemn but his eyes warm. The entire pack surrounded them in a vast circle. Even the allied packs had stayed to witness this historic moment. Elder Corinne stepped forward to perform the ceremony. "We gather tonight to witness the bonding of 2 alphas, Rowan Blackthorn, King of the Northern Territories, and Lyora Vale, the silver wolf who rose from ashes to claim her true power." The crowd murmured in approval. "Do you, Rowan Blackthorn, choose this woman as your equal, to stand beside her in strength and support her in weakness, to honor her wisdom and trust her judgment?" "I do," Rowan said clearly.
Corinne turned to Leora. Do you, Leora Vale, choose this man as your equal, to stand beside him in strength and support him in weakness, to honor his courage and trust his heart? Leora's voice trembled but remained steady. I do. Then, by the power vested in me by the ancient laws of our kind, I declare you bonded, Alpha and Luna, king and queen. May your reign be long and your love be eternal. Rowan stepped forward and took Leora's hands in his. I love you, he said softly, just for her. I think I've loved you since the night I found you crying in the kitchen. Leora's eyes filled with tears. I love you too, even though I probably shouldn't, even though it terrifies me. Good, Rowan said with a slight smile. Love should terrify you. It means it's real. He leaned down and kissed her as the pack erupted in howls of celebration. When they finally broke apart, Leora looked around at the gathered wolves, warriors who had once scorned her, elders who had doubted her, pack members who had dismissed her as worthless. Now they were all howling for her, celebrating her, accepting her as their Luna. The broken servant girl had become a queen. In the weeks that followed, Leora established new laws to protect the vulnerable within the pack. No child would be abused. No wolf would be dismissed as worthless. And anyone who violated these laws would face immediate exile. The pack grumbled at first, but gradually they adapted. And something unexpected happened. Wolves from other packs began seeking refuge in Blackthorn territory. They came with stories of abuse, neglect, rejection. They came broken and desperate. And Leora welcomed them all. She built a sanctuary within the castle walls, a place where damaged wolves could heal and learn to be strong again. Some thought she was being soft, weak, allowing her past to cloud her judgment. But Rowan understood. She wasn't being weak. She was building something revolutionary, a pack where strength didn't mean brutality, where power didn't require cruelty. News of the Silver Luna spread across the territories. Other alphas heard the story of the servant girl who became a queen. They heard about the trials she'd passed, the mercy she'd shown, the alpha power that had awakened within her. Some mocked the story as fantasy, but others, particularly those who had been dismissed as weak or worthless themselves, heard it and felt hope for the first time in their lives. Rival packs stopped testing Blackthorn's borders. The threat of war receded like a distant tide. And on quiet nights, when the moon was high and the forest was peaceful, Rowan and Leora would shift into their wolf forms and run together through the trees. The massive black wolf and the luminous silver one, moving through the darkness like twin stars. Two alphas, two souls, one unbreakable bond. They ran not from the past, but toward the future they were building together. A future where the broken could heal, the weak could become strong, and love could triumph over every form of cruelty. Leora had survived the unthinkable. She had endured 7 years of torture and emerged stronger than anyone could have imagined. But more than that, she had proven that true strength wasn't measured by how hard you could hit. It was measured by how many times you got back up after being knocked down. And she had gotten up every single time. Years later, when young wolves asked about the legend of the Silver Luna, the elders would tell them the truth. She was real. She had lived, she had suffered, and she had transformed that suffering into something beautiful. The girl who was told she was worthless became the heart of an entire kingdom. The wolf who was poisoned and broken awakened as one of the most powerful alphas in history. And the love story between the Alpha King and his Silver Luna became the standard by which all other bonds were measured. Because Leora Vale taught the pack something they had forgotten, that strength without compassion is just cruelty. That power without mercy is just tyranny, and that the most courageous thing anyone can do is choose kindness in a world that has shown them nothing but brutality. On the battlements where Rowan first found Leora all those months ago, a memorial was built, not to war or victory, but to survival. Carved into the stone in silver letters were these words, "Here stood the broken. Here rose the queen. Let none who suffer ever believe they are less than they are." And every night, as the moon rose over Blackthorn Castle, those words gleamed in the darkness, a promise to every damaged soul who sought refuge there. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not worthless. You are not alone. And if you keep fighting, keep surviving, keep refusing to give up, one day, you too will rise.